Welcome to Pep Talks with Eric, the podcast where self-work becomes system work. I'm your host, Eric Ayers, creator and author of SimRx, Transforming Healthcare, Leadership, and Culture by Design. This show is your space to shift perspectives, ignite action, and remember who you are and who we are in the process. Every week, we spark transformation, from burnout to breakthrough, from surviving to designing. You'll hear real stories, real tools, and real humans doing real work. So let's shift, let's build, and let's spark what's next together. I'll see you inside. Guys, welcome to another episode of Pep Talks with Eric. I'm your host, Eric Ayers, and today is going to be a fun, engaged conversation. I am here with Yarona Boster, who we recently were introduced, we met, and had an amazing conversation. So we thought we need to bring this to the world. So Yarona is a certified speaker and a communications coach, and we've identified communication as probably the highest trait needed in all relationships, especially leadership, parenting, marriage, list goes on and on and on. She's also a TEDx speaker, which is super cool, and a 2-time best-selling international author. So she has the credentials, and we're here to understand the why and the story behind those credentials. So Yarona, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Eric. I really appreciate being here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's dive right into this. You and I had a conversation, and it was after a couple of minutes, it just kind of opened up. So that's the plan for this conversation. So tell us a little bit about yourself beyond the credentials, beyond the success. What's the story behind the success?
I will go deep because I don't really know any other way to go.
That's great.
I don't tend to be a surface level person. I just jump right into the deep end. Everything I've ever learned in my life has been through a lot of mistakes, whether those are my mistakes, other people's mistakes, and so on. The other piece to this puzzle is that everything I've learned tends to center around death and the dying experience. A lot of life and death in my life from the earliest stages, from my earliest days. I was raised in a Jewish household. My father was a Holocaust survivor. And it taught me a lot about what really matters. And yet, of course, I still made my mistakes along the way. I will say things didn't really start to come to where they are now until I had this experience that I had on repeat in my professional world. So in my professional world, I spent many, many, many years. And now at this point, we're going on almost 19 years in the world of early childhood, human development, psychology, and coaching. And I started to see a pattern where parents were having a really hard time, well, just being parents. And we actually have that. The Surgeon General said that one day, back in, I think, 2024, he actually put out that there was a study done that parents are most overwhelmed with being parents. And that makes sense because in this day and age, as the world has sped up in the last 40, 50 years, we've sped up our perception of what it means to be a parent. We've sped up what it means to be an engaged parent, what it means to be a healthy parent, what it means to be a person who's capable of communicating in the healthiest way with your child, with this human that you are raising.
Right.
But nothing quite changed like when I started having a lot of loss and death in my life. And I started seeing it at a different perspective. And this is a lot about what my TEDx talk was about. My staff would come to me and they'd say, "Oh, Yarona, I don't know, nothing's getting through this parent. I try and try and try, but they're still coddling their child. They're still not creating boundaries and rules in the house. They still don't believe in, saying no to their children." And I realized that with all the death I was experiencing, something was occurring to me with the way parents were treating their children when they do this coddling, oh, I'm going to be my kid's best friend. I'm going to listen to everything they need. And that's how I'm going to be able to parent really well. Unlike my parents who everything was no, everything was that authoritarian way of like, because I said so, because I'm the parent and I have the power here. And I get that parents wanted to change that people who were raised with that for eons, that was the way people were raised in this authoritarian model, wanted to change it. But they moved into a place where we call it a permissive style parenting. Everything's permissible. Well, maybe this won't be, and maybe this won't be. But they didn't actually set up standards by which their kids could live by. And as a result, the kids were kind of all over the place. And I started looking at it through the lens of loss. And I realized that when parents shield their kids from the natural life hurdles, when they don't give them boundaries by which the kids can actually function in, and they start to try to coddle them and they like, oh, I'll just take care of this for you. I'll just take care of this for you. Oh, you don't need to do that. I'll take care of it. What they were doing essentially was dismantling their children's ability to accept and process and then accept loss. And I started to see things categorically as foundational losses. And when you're young, the losses are small. The loss of a toy because it broke or it went missing and you lost it. And then as we get older, these things, they start to get more complex. You didn't get a good grade even though you studied hard. You didn't get into the after-school program you wanted or the sport program you wanted or the extracurricular activity. You didn't get into the college you wanted. You lost a friendship. You lost a pet. These are starting to get into like real like losses. And then losing a job, losing a relationship, and then ultimately, losing a loved one. We all experience that at some point in our lives. Now, some people can make it into their 50s, 60s, and even 70s before they lose somebody, although that's rare, the 70s. Usually by 50s, 60s is when a lot of people will lose their parents and so on. And that's natural. But we fight it every step of the way. We say, oh my God, I can't imagine losing my loved one, da, 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 da. Yes, you can and you should. Not imagine it, but figure out how to process it. Figure out from an earlier stage and age how to do that. And as I started to have conversations with these families who would really struggle with how to, shape the life that their children were having, I saw that the coddling was coming from the fear. It was coming from, well, I don't want my child to hurt. But the thing is, it is inevitable that all humans hurt at some point. All humans fail. All humans suffer. All humans experience loss in some shape or another. And if you're trying to protect and shield them from that, what you're doing is you're lessening their ability to build their own resilience mechanisms to get through it when they inevitably do. So I started to have a different conversation with parents. I started to say, okay, I want you to imagine this. You are a multi-billionaire. You have set up your child for all success in the world. They have everything they need, everything they could ever want. And then you come to your deathbed. As a parent, in your role as a parent, you are on your deathbed. What is the one thing you want to know for your children? And most parents would say, I want to know my children will be okay without me. And when we dive into that, it's not okay, financially successful, legacy, that they're set up for physical stability, but rather that they're going to be mentally and emotionally capable, that their heart is not going to be shattered to pieces, that it won't repair one day.
Yeah.
And that changed it, because then I said, so as a parent, knowing what you need to know at the end, you have to start with that end goal in mind.
There's so much to unpack within that. Beautifully put. Thank you for that. And thank you for the calm energy. It's interesting on the receiving end of this to flow with this pattern of emotion. And like I was in the story, I was going through both as child and parent and seeing the paradox of this. Because if I understand this correctly, I'm a shared learner of the world of mistake it until I make it, right? Of the Thomas Edison approach. I've said this before, and I'm learning how to learn quicker from the mistakes instead of the habitual patterns, right? So it's a different conversation. However, there's a balance. There must be a balance, I'm assuming, of too much boundaries and no boundaries. So almost like guardrails of, okay, here's the proposed area to stay in, feel free to color outside of the lines, just not off of the paper, so to speak. So to speak into that a little bit, because that I think from a human behavior, from a human psychology, and from a parenting,
Yeah.
to me, that's the hardest part is we have a 16-year-old to say, all right, you're free to drive, but like you can't drive wherever you want. There's still some
Right.
rules. So
Here are the rules.
yes,
Right.
yes. And in more of less rules of dictation, more of structure of we're preparing you. Like this is our
Right.
job, is to help prepare you to where when you are able to process, and love this key point, learning how to process the current situation. And that's why the boundaries are there, to where when you learn to process this, the boundaries either expand or we shift. And now we're in a new environment, right? That I've never heard it put that way. And that to me, that makes a lot of sense. So back to the question. If you can speak into the balance of, this dichotomy of, you presented like this dictated role, and then a new generation coming up and saying, no, we're going to completely permiss everything.
Right. Yes.
Where's the balance
So-
and how do we find it? So
And this is such a great thing to dive into. I actually have a whole theory, which I'm building into my parenting book that I'm writing right now. And I call it the four boundaries of living. What's really interesting about the four boundaries of living is that as a parent, when your child is young, you actually automatically understand the natural boundary of living. The natural boundary is actually the broadest boundary. It's that, and I'll tell it to you through a story that I said to this mom once when I was going for a meeting. Okay. I walked into this house and we would do I worked specifically in early childhood, birth to 3, with children with developmental delays and disabilities. And I ran the program, and we would have these meetings, and they were always in the home because the services we provided were always in the home. Walk in one day and the 2-year-old is climbing the wall. He was climbing the drapes that were over the window. And I looked and I looked at the mom and I said, "Are you okay with this?" And she said, "Well, yeah, absolutely. Because here's the thing. I don't want to tell him no. I don't want to restrict him. I want him to feel like the sky is the limit." And when you're dealing with a child who has a potential developmental delay or a disability, even more so, there's this parental worry and fear that your kids I want them to be able to feel like they're capable of doing anything.
right.
And that is a beautiful thing in theory. And I said to her, okay. I said, how about skydiving? How do you feel about skydiving? When your child is old enough, in your opinion, to go skydiving, would you be okay with that? And she's like, well, yeah, if he wanted to do it and he was capable, yeah, absolutely. I said, great. How about if you wanted to go skydiving without a parachute? And she looked at me like I was crazy. And then I said, because here's the thing. Life has natural boundaries, natural rules. And when I say boundaries, we'll get into, like, there's a difference between boundaries, standards, expectations, and rules. But when we think about it, life has natural rules where you can't jump out of a plane and go skydiving without a parachute unless you want it to be the last thing you do. The likelihood of you surviving that, yeah, I mean, that's miraculous. Same thing as when your kid is little and they want to jump off the roof of the house with the cape on. You understand that, it's not going to work and they could very much hurt themselves. So as a parent, we start with that, okay, I need them to survive. Like, that's it. I just need to make sure they're surviving. So we understand that life has natural boundaries and rules. So that's like the biggest one of all. But let's get to the granular place. In the first stage, there are personal boundaries. And these are the things that you set up that are between you, yourself, and me, myself, and I.
Mm-hmm.
What I am willing to do for myself, what I'm willing to accept. Let's say that it's sleeping pattern. No, this is my sleeping pattern only affects me, although it certainly impacts other people if I don't sleep well. But that's about me. What I take into my body, what I ingest, that's all about me. How I choose to dress, how I choose to, show up in the world. It's all about me. These are my personal boundaries. And they're always fluctuating, dependent on, where you are in life.
Right.
So it's important to have your own check-in with yourself. Am I willing to do this? Am I capable of doing it? It's mostly, am I willing to do this? Am I willing to do this? Is this something I'm comfortable with? And that's really important because it moves you into that space of being able to hit the next boundary level, which I call interpersonal boundaries. These are the boundaries we create for ourselves within the interpersonal relationships we have with others. So there are familial relationships, our friendships, the relationships we have in school with our teachers and all of those things, the relationships we have with partners as we grow older, and all of those interpersonal relationships where we have to have a relationship with another person. How do we navigate the boundaries where we're in flux with that other person? It's really important. Here's where communication, and this is why I'm in that space of communication, where communication is the most important thing. Because if you suddenly decide one day, you know what, I no longer like going out to parties. This is your personal boundary.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like going out to parties, but your partner does. And they love going to parties. And they're like, let's go. We're going to go to this party. And you don't communicate. You know what? Things have changed for me. I no longer really like that. How do we navigate this? Because now you're a party person and I'm not a party person. How do we navigate this together? And this is where a lot of compromise comes in, a lot of negotiation comes in, a lot of, again, communication. Well, I don't like it and you do. I know how much it's important to you. So I'm willing to go to like 1 or 2 parties a month. And I don't mind if you go out to more. That's cool with me, because that's important to you. But this is where communication comes. And I notice that we are really struggling with this these days because people don't know how to speak to one another about their personal boundaries so that they can interpersonally function together and respect one another and find compromise and negotiation and be capable of seeing it from other people's perspectives. We are having a really hard time. So more often than not, we're just like, that's it. I'm done with that friendship. I'm done with that relationship. That's it. I'm done. I'm going to cut off my family. I'm going to cut off because they don't understand me and my needs.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not fair. That's not I shouldn't say fair. Fairness has nothing to do with it. It's not an appropriate or healthy way to have a sustainable relationship. You are never going to have the exact wants and needs of somebody else, and they are never going to have the exact wants and needs of you. On top of that, as we evolve as people, our wants and needs are constantly changing. So if we don't communicate that, what are we doing?
Right.
You can't expect somebody to read your mind. It's not possible. In fact, one of the things that I tell people all the time is communication is the way by which other people understand your thoughts, your ideas, and your emotions. They cannot connect directly to your ideas or thoughts. They cannot connect directly to your emotions. There's no mind melding thing happening here.
Right.
So communication is actually a behavior. It's the behavior by which we express ourselves. And that means the great thing is communication is also a skill and it can be developed at any point. It can be worked on. It can be modified. It's not changing you. It's changing how you help others know who you are at your core. So I'll tell you the last boundary level, the second to last. I told you I actually started with the biggest one, which was the natural boundaries.
Yeah.
The one past interpersonal is what I call societal boundaries. Societal boundaries are there because we would descend into chaos if we didn't have them. As a species, we require connection. And as a species, we become stronger in community. When a community stands within itself to actually work together constructively to create this thing. And a society is really a community. It's a series of communities. So I would say about 99.9% of humans live in some kind of community.
Mhm.
It is the rare Ralph Waldo Emerson who lives on his own,
Right.
And almost always they tend to go crazy because as humans, and in fact, there's a psychological theory, which again is in my book that has to do with this, called the self-determination theory. And humans need connection.
Mhm.
So we need that connection, not just interpersonally, one-on-one, but we also need that connection more constructively in a society because we need to know what are the rules when I'm here in this place and space. If we don't know that, it's really hard for us to function. And that's what boundaries are. They give us the ability to know where the guardrails are, to know how to function in that space. Because if we don't have them, we don't know how to function. If there's no speed limits signs, some people are going to go 20 miles an hour, some people are going to go 120 miles an hour.
Right.
That's how a society helps us. And yes, there is a systemic nature to a society. Does it always get it right? No, absolutely not. And it's another thing that needs to constantly redesign itself in order to help optimize its citizens' capacity to function optimally in that space.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, there was about 98 different nuggets that we could pull out of there. I'm gonna want to do my best to focus on 2 or 3 of these that ignited something in me. One, as you were explaining the boundaries and the different levels, I was drawn to Maslow's hierarchy of need as well as Gallup's hierarchy of engagement. And it's almost like in my mind, through that explanation, I created a new pyramid of merging the two of this is how we go from individuality into community, right? And it's almost like a series of systems that are processed. I'm going to go back to that word because that is super important. It's processed through the humans that are using the systems to build into one-on-one relationship, and then into a team, into a group, into a community, into a society that then functions. But all of those are based on not rules, but guidelines, right? These structures that are saying like we have to stay in between here, otherwise chaos exists because everyone goes their own way. So in order for us to, I don't know, be innovative, we have to at least be thinking, what is our goal? Which is what you started this whole thing with, is start from the end and work backwards. And it's almost like, here's the big picture. Here's a rough map. We're going to draw this together. And then we're going to work our way there, realizing this map is awful because we didn't know there was going to be a 3,000-foot incline on this mountain that we got to go around. And we start doing all of this together. And so the mistakes become no longer mistakes. Now they are the journey itself. Right.
Yeah.
So that's the picture I painted in my mind, as well as something profound that I actually experienced and it was through communication. First of all, I love how you said that we must communicate what we're thinking, what we're feeling, and Joe Dispenza says that our personality is what we think, what we feel, how we act. So like ultimately we need to communicate our personality for someone else to receive that, instead of what I fall prey to is, oh, I'm changing. They'll see it. They'll figure it out. Right. And I'm not consciously saying that, but I'm like, I don't even know how to articulate it because I don't even know what's going on, which leads to my person, right? My wife, my champion in this world who is on my side, I leave her out and she begins to mourn this person that no longer exists because I'm becoming someone else and we're not even talking about it. Right. So back to the original conversation on loss.
Yeah.
This is a loss that I didn't even realize happened on our journey as we continue to build and become who we are. And you articulated very well on how communication can lessen that and speed the growth on both ends. So thank you for that.
I want to go like to a degree, sort of what Joe Dispenza said, but it's very interesting because this is what I say this all the time. Here's the deal. We've got, I believe our thoughts and our ideas are two distinctly different things. Thoughts they're really crazy, right? Ideas are
Yes.
something else and have potential to implement. Then our feelings, and then like our behaviors, right? Or our actions.
Right.
Think about it from this perspective. That means other people only experience a fourth of us because other people can only experience our behaviors. They're only experiencing a fourth of us.
Mhm.
So our behaviors we need to be aware of what behaviors are exemplifying all the rest of us. And if you want to get even deeper and more philosophical, if you believe in a higher power, there's a core of our existence that is something else. And I will say that in all the death I've experienced, nothing prepared me for experiencing the loss of that core other than when I lost it, when each of those people, the people in my life, died.
Yeah.
And there was a visceral moment. And if people don't want to hear this story, I it is about a death, a particular death. When my niece died, my sister called me that morning and she was like, things are bad. We're in the hospital. We've been here all night. Side note, my niece and her brother both had very severe disabilities. And they were non-walkers, non-talkers, GJ tubes. They had a very rare recessive genetic disorder. My niece was 14 at the time. And long story short, I rushed to the hospital. I got up there to the room and burst in. And my sister's like, stop, don't come in here if you can't handle this. And I looked over and I saw she was already gone. And there was a whole host of things going on also because of something that happened in the waiting room, or in the reception area. But I can tell you this, when I looked at her, the first thought that popped into my head was, that's not her. That's not her. I know a lot of people have gone to wakes and they're, oh, they look so good, da da da, But we also know the instinct that tells us that person is gone comes, if we listen to it and tap into it, we can feel it and know it even before we actually experience it, even before we're actually there in the room with them. But that essence, that core of who a human is, I think that's where our higher power exists. And when that thread is snapped, I do believe that energy is never truly gone. I just think it's gone from the vessel that carried it.
Right.
It doesn't mean it's gone forever. It just dispels into something else. So when I say 4 things, I really mean 5, but a lot of people can't handle that idea, or they are not religious in any kind. They don't believe in God or the existence of a higher power, or they might believe in chaos theory and so on and so forth. So I don't like to push that idea, but I will say, even if you were not talking about that 5th core essence, you're only experienced by people through your behaviors, and your behavior exemplifies all these other things that are going on inside internally, which means if you're not externalizing what's going on internally, you may know a whole lot about yourself changing. And if you don't express that appropriately, other people have no clue. And it is, by the way, the nature of people, because when we're young, and we're being taken care of and our needs are being met, and we don't have to overly express anything other than our crying, there is an expectation, and it has a lot to do with our ego. And ego is not a bad thing. This is actually a piece of our survival mechanism. I want people to understand the difference. When we talk about like, oh, that person is such an ego, that is an entirely different story
Right.
than what real ego is in the psychological aspect of it. Ego is a core piece of us that helps us survive. It's a part of our survival instinct. If we don't cry to let our needs be known, they won't be met. Or at least that's the way, that most people pulled that out, right? Oh, the baby's crying, the baby needs something. But that said, when you think about where that comes to, the baby cries, the baby needs something, it also tells the baby, oh, everybody knows what I need. Everybody knows what I want. And then the infant, as they grow, need somebody to express to them, no, I need you to express yourself.
Right.
Because I don't know everything. And as your life gets more complex and it goes beyond just basic survival, and we start to learn about our wants, our desires, our motivators, all of our intrinsic motivators, our extrinsic motivators, all of these different pieces of the puzzle that become us. What is very interesting to understand is we still don't have existential awareness until we're in our young teens. Existential awareness doesn't come until you're like 12, 13, 14.
Mm-hmm.
So you still don't understand that. And my son is going to be 8 soon. And I do believe that he has more existential awareness than other kids. And that's just simply because he's been around death. And it's changed the nature of how he processes life and death. But we also don't give our young ones enough credit to be able to handle that stuff.
Valid point.
And it's really frustrating to me that parents are like, no, they can't handle that. And I had a client once who said to me that her parents didn't let her go to her grandfather's funeral. And I said, well, how old were you? And she said, I was 18. She was 18 and her parents decided, no, it would be too much for her. What frustrates me is parents making the decision for that's going to be too much for you. Instead of saying, this is a human experience, how can we help support our child in this human experience?
Right.
Yeah, that's not to say everything is age appropriate. I'm not saying that, but there are age appropriate ways to express and process loss. When my son was not even 4, his cat died, our cat. And I didn't shield him from that. I didn't, and I think a lot of parents who make the mistake of saying, oh, our cat had to go to another family or our cat had to go to a farm. I don't think they understand that's still a loss.
Right.
And your kid, just because you don't want to talk about death doesn't mean it's not a loss, and they still have to process it. And yet a lot of parents are like, that'll be easier. And they kind of make it this no big deal. Oh, it's a surface level, whatever. And it is. It's a really big deal. You've got to process that with them too. They're going to be hurt at some point regardless. So instead of trying to avoid it or make it easier, quote unquote, like lightening it, just process it with them.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason why parents don't want to do that, it's not about their kid, it's about them. I don't want to be in pain watching my child in pain. I can't handle that struggle. That's why they'll say, it's okay, you're fine, you're okay. That's why we say that to kids, because we're so uncomfortable with their discomfort and their pain and their suffering that we try to ease it by easing our burden of it by saying, no, you're fine, you're okay, it's all good. We can't do that. We just simply have to process it with them.
Which is most definitely difficult, especially when we are potentially processing our own emotions at the time, right?
Yes.
And I think this is where emotional intelligence plays such a huge role in our ability to ultimately emotionally support other people and to lead with empathy, right?
Yes.
Because, and this is fascinating to me because the way this is presented, which is, I love the way this is presented, is that we learn this through practice. and this is what I teach, like we learn everything through practice. So why, if we know this, and I know we know this, like no one knows how to ride a bicycle unless you actually get on the bicycle and try to ride it. There is no other way to figure this out except to put the body in motion, right? And figure out that the slower I go, the harder this is. And, you know, if we know this, I'm curious to why, and maybe there is not a answer to this, but why we take that ability away from ourselves, from our kids, from our team, from our staff, from our company. Why don't we offer education through play and practice, which are the two ways that we began to come into this world learning? Like we already knew how to cry. The crying was the initial, this is my communication tool. And everything after that is practicing communication vocally.
Right.
Right.
Well, we also aren't born with social emotional development skills. It's not inherent in us. We learn it from the environment we're in. Okay, so the why, the big why.
Yes, I'm super fascinated with this because this is what I teach. This is what I coach. This is what I offer. Is if me as a nurse,
Yeah.
if I'm not 100% competent in a skill, meaning I don't know how to do this skill so well that I don't have to think about it and I can provide emotional support to someone else. If I don't know it that well, how give me the tools so I can practice this, right? And why isn't that a standard?
The big why goes to our amygdala. It goes to our reptilian brain. It goes to our survival instinct. We have certainly evolved over these, many, 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 millennia. But there's still a core component to us that triggers our hyperarousal fight or fight instinct. And by the way, there are 7 hyperarousal states. And it's very interesting because every person born responds slightly differently in the hyperarousal state. We are so unique. This is one of my favorite statistics to tell people. They did a study about 13 years ago, figured out how unique every human is based on genetic trait, genetic makeup, where you come from, who in recorded history, where and when you've been born into the world.
Mhm.
So time period, chronology, and also where environmentally, where you were born. And then experientially, as you move into life and you experience life, we are as unique as 1 in 400 trillion humans. And we don't have 400 trillion humans in recorded history yet.
Right.
So here's the thing. Even though we are sort of seemingly designed essentially the same, the markers that make us up as individuals are unique to us as people. And I think if you believe in a higher power, I think there is a height of irony in what this higher power created. This power created this unique individual human who requires autonomy, the ability to choose for oneself, to control one's environment. And yet life is all about change, and everything in life is a consistency of change. We're evolving. Evolution is the state of change that we're constantly going through. And it created an autonomous person who wants to be singularly autonomous individual and as unique as they truly are, yet requires us to live in a communal society. We are a communal species. So there's such a really interesting dichotomy to that. But that said, at the base, the core base of it all is our survival. And when we go into hyperarousal state, our emotions are triggered first before our logic is ever triggered, right? That gets triggered before our prefrontal cortex ever gets triggered. Unless we learn how to flip the switch, unless we actively learn how to engage the switch that helps us. Okay, I need to jump into this with logic. And we are never going to be perfect in doing so. None of us are Vulcans. It doesn't happen that way, right? We emotionally respond first, but it doesn't mean it controls how we externalize our response. We can change our externalized response, even if we are emotional about it first, and not when we are emotional about it first. And one of the ways I do it is I call it the emotional stopgap mechanism. And I like to have the people that I work with imagine there's a valve inside your brain. And first things first is you become aware of the emotions that you're responding with. I'm really frustrated. I'm angry. I'm disappointed. I'm scared. I'm all of these things. You need to be able to acknowledge those things to yourself. And this requires an emotional and internalized communication mechanism, not just feeling the thoughts, but communicating with yourself. These are my thoughts. These,
Right.
or rather, not just feeling the emotions, but rather communicating to yourself. I am feeling these emotions, and it's one of the reasons why it's so important to. I personally like to verbalize things out loud. I'm a very verbal processor, but I do think it really helps because it actually takes the power of what's holding space in your brain and pulls it externally. I am feeling very frustrated. I am feeling very angry. I am very scared in this moment. I am very joyous. And by the way, all emotions, there's no negatives or positives to them. They just are what they are.
Right.
So I like, I'm really happy right now. I am so excited. I'm nervous. I'm XYZ. But when you say those things to yourself and you communicate that, whether externally or internally, you're acknowledging these are the feelings I'm having. You don't shut that down. You don't say, I can't feel this stuff. But what you then can do once you've acknowledged them is turn that emotional stopgap mechanism, turn that valve a little bit and say, okay, now that I've acknowledged all of these feelings, I now need to turn the dial down a little bit and pull them down. And everybody has different methodologies for how they do it. And I always recommend to people that I work with, explore what works for you, because as an individual, as a unique 1 in 400 trillion, not everything that works for everybody else is going to work for you.
Right.
I personally dislike it when somebody says, you have to do XYZ. Oh, you should do this. You should do this. There's no should. Exploring is the best way. Finding what works for you, then that becomes your mechanism until it stops working, and then you locate another one. This is the same thing is true for parents and children. What works one day might not work the next day.
Right.
You've got to have a whole tool bucket, right? A hammer can't be applied in every circumstance. A screwdriver can't be applied in every circumstance. So explore. And then once you've been able to use that mechanism to turn that valve and slow the rate at which your emotions are coming in, then you can start to say, okay, now what do I need to do to engage in this situation in the healthiest way possible? I always use this example when I'm talking to people. My son once was in the middle of the frozen aisle in the grocery store on the floor, screaming his head off about getting a Hot Wheels car. He was probably like 2.5 or 3, and he is screaming. And I'm like, okay. Now, a lot of times, and by the way, and I know that one of the things that's hyperactivated some of our poor responses is because of other people filming us, other people paying attention and being very judgmental. If you respond in every circumstance based on what other people think, you're always going to respond poorly. You're always going to respond poorly. You need to respond in the best way that's best for you and your child. What is best for you in this circumstance? What is best for your child in this circumstance? So I just go, okay, nobody else matters but us. This is not about them. This is about us. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so aggravated. Oh my God, I just want to get out of the damn store. I'm embarrassed. I'm this. But you have to acknowledge those feelings. Oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. Oh my God, what must they think of me? Here's the difference though. When you say I'm so embarrassed to yourself, there's a difference between what must they think of me? Because what must they think of me is throwing what they value over you. You can acknowledge being embarrassed, but don't let what other people's judgment calls are. You can say, I feel very judged. I feel very embarrassed. When you say I feel, you're acknowledging and owning your feelings as opposed to acknowledging and owning what other people's perceptions are. This isn't about their perceptions. It's just about your own.
Right.
So when we do that, and then, so I was like, oh my God, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. Oh my God, I'm so frustrated. I'm tired. I just want to go. I just don't want to have to deal with this thing. Right. all of those things. And then I said, okay, what does he need now? So I had, for me, taking a pause is the most powerful thing we can do. Or at least for me, this is what works for me. I take a pause. I don't react right away. I don't respond right away. I've learned how to create the space for the pause.
Mm-hmm.
And first it started with, I need to count. I need to count to 10. I need to count to 20 sometimes.
Yeah.
But 10 or 20 seconds, even though it feels like a lot, is actually not a lot. Right. So if we count, the reality versus our perception of reality is totally different. So I counted to 20. I'm like, okay. And then I sat down on the floor right next to him, because the other thing every human needs, and especially our children, they need the empathy and the connection. They need to know you're acknowledging that they are feeling a certain way. Every human needs to know that. Like if I'm sad about something and nobody is picking up on that, nobody is like acknowledging, or I express that and people are like, you don't need to be sad.
Yeah.
That's so minimizing. It says that doesn't, my sad doesn't actually mean anything to you.
Right.
And this is another reason why I try to tell people, don't ever say to somebody, it's going to be, you're okay. It's okay. Because that's the worst thing you can tell somebody. You're minimizing how they're feeling. Mm-hmm. So instead, you're like, I see how angry you are. I see how sad you are. I see how upset you are. Man, tell me what else is going on. What's going on? And you just are there for them. Then they can start to say, oh, somebody sees. Because this is core connection, a core need. Connect first. And connection requires us to acknowledge that they are feeling a feeling. Whether they're right or wrong about feeling that feeling is not up for us to decide. Mm-hmm. We have to connect first. And we can talk about it later. And by the way, I think people need to know, I am not a perfect parent by any means. I don't think there is such a thing. If some parenting expert or communications expert ever tells you that they're perfect at it and they know exactly what you need to do, run away. They don't know you. Until they know you, they are not going to know what you need to do. They can give you their knowledge of what they know and their expertise, but they can't tell you what you exactly need to do. They can't live your life for you because they're not you. So don't listen. So, I'm not a perfect parent by any means, but I also have come to realize that my son has a lot of emotional regulatory issues. He does. He's got some diagnoses coming up and because I've been in the fields for so long, I understand them from a clinical standpoint, but it also requires me from a parental standpoint to say, I don't know what his exact needs are. I need support. The worst thing we can do is try to fix something. And I use air quotes to say fix, because I don't think there is any real fixing. But the worst thing we can do is try to address something in isolation. Mm-hmm. Because especially when we're super close to it, and this goes the same thing for communications. If you believe you are communicating something really well, but nobody's ever given you feedback on whether or not you are, how do you know if you're accurately doing it well or not?
Right.
That is really hard. It requires somebody who has a non-judgmental perspective and can give you critical feedback that will help you improve your skills.
Right.
And not a criticism, but a critical feedback that requires you to, I'm very particular with my wording, and a lot of people will use words and throw them away here and there and everywhere. And I think, words matter greatly, but how you express them matters even more. Mm-hmm. And yeah, go ahead.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because in communication, we all have different ideas and understanding and definitions of different words. So they mean different things to each other. And sometimes when someone hears feedback, they're like, oh, this is criticism. No, like legit feedback is one of the kindest things that we can receive, because it's showing us, to your point, is our behavior matching our internal drive, feelings, and all of this internal mechanism that's going on? Is it matching? And so if we can be curious enough to ask for that or to receive that and to say, this feedback is not about me in terms of they're not telling me I suck. They're telling me I could communicate this a little bit better. Okay, they still like me, they still love me. That's not the case in point. All of that is predisposed things that I'm bringing to the table. So it's an opportunity for me to move beyond self, move beyond that ego, right? And into how do I expand? And I love the idea of not doing things in isolation because as a healthcare worker working with pediatrics, death, like horrible things, things that humans are not supposed to witness, was witnessed on a daily basis in terms, and then it culminated into I no longer feel. And if I can't feel, how in the world am I supposed to interact with other human beings? Right? Because
Yeah.
this is this is what we do. And so that was my journey, or the way Wayne Dyer says it, that was my curriculum to God. That was
Yeah.
that was my processing to learn how to process this, to say, oh, wait, I'm angry or I feel really sad right now. And I don't know why. Let me breathe for a minute because I'm a lover of knowledge. And so if I can understand the pathophysiology of what's going on, it resonates with me. And when I learned that, hey, this chemical cocktail that's being released when I'm like super angry, if I give it a minute or less and simply breathe, everything's absorbed and out. And then now, if I continue that to my own thought pattern, recreating the chemical cocktail release. And
Right.
so
Exactly.
cool. So that
90
pause.
seconds, by the way.
Yes.
90
Not
seconds is
long,
the amount of time it takes to have that dissipate from your system.
which is not long when we
Not long. You can
well,
even set a timer. You can say, I'm
yeah,
feeling this feels. I
yeah.
got it. Okay. And let the 90 seconds move through you because you're absolutely right. And I want to express that back to what you just said. The only reason the 90 seconds will actually go longer than 90 seconds is because our thoughts feed it.
Yes. Yes. And exactly, because it's like, oh, we need more of this chemical, more of this chemical, as opposed to I don't need this. Let's chill, and then this shuts off, and then we are able to think. Because
Yeah.
a early, I think our daughter was, I don't know, 3 or 4 at the time, and someone told us that when a child is in a tantrum state, they are cutting their analytical mind in half. So if they're
Mm.
5, they have the analytical ability of a 2.5-year-old. And they're like, and that doesn't really change for adults. As
Mhm.
we're in this fight, flight, or freeze state, our
Yeah.
analytical mind is no longer there because our mind is now saying, you need to be safe. Like I have to keep you alive.
Mhm.
I don't care what we're going to eat for lunch in 3 hours. I cannot think about that right now because you have this metaphorical tiger chasing you. And so,
That's important. But I
yes,
need to say this.
yes, please, please.
5-year-olds don't have an analytical mind. I want people to understand something. The growth and development process of our logical thought processes stems completely from the people that we are influenced by and the practice of it. So if you're growing up in a family who never practices emotional regulation, who never thinks logically, who it's all about yelling and screaming or lovey-dovey or,
Right.
or there's a lot of trauma going on. There's a lot of there's a lot of just like, it's all bad feels and it's all just problem after problem after problem. And nobody actually teaches a child how to develop that skill, the skill of logical thinking and putting things in its place and, okay, this and that and the other. You don't actually build that skill. So when you're crying and screaming and and the only thing your parent responded to was, I'll give you something to just cry and scream about and spanks you because they figure, okay, I'm just going to smack you. You actually don't, instead of doing any logical thinking, you shut down your emotions and you repress and bury them. And so then you just function through life and there's no logic to it. It's just, how do I survive this? So you go through a process of like, I just know that I can't express my feelings or I will get some really bad response. So this is a cause and response type of situation. This is,
Right.
So there's so many inappropriate and unhealthy ways to help your to raise a child into, and so many people don't even think logically. They don't even have that. They're just like, okay, I'm just going to function in the way that makes the least waves possible.
Right.
And that's really important to know.
Which absolutely, because that is the paradigms that we carry with us through this life that were created through this environmental, whatever the environment was, right? So
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. This
That's
time
important.
has flown by. We have to do this again and continue to expand. Thank you so much. And where can people find you?
Easiest way is yaronaboster.com, my website. There are 2 components to my website. So if you go on there, you can also link, all the links are there to go to footprints.org. And that is my footprintscoaching.org. And that's my parenting and loss work. Okay. And then, my life coaching work. And then the yaronaboster.com holds all of the space for my speakers and all the work I do with people on communications and how to speak publicly, but also how to communicate better. I do work with a lot of people who are in varied levels of executive placement who really struggle with how to communicate with their subordinates or their superiors, or really struggle with communicating with their peers and so on and so forth. I do that as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you. This has been an absolute pleasure. And again, we have to do this. We have to do this again.
Okay. Will do.
Awesome. Guys, thank you. Please reach out. If this resonated with you, like, share, subscribe, send it to someone that you know needs it, and spend some time self-reflecting on, am I communicating appropriately, and who can give me feedback, right? And let's shift this back into play, how we learn as a toddler, right? This toddler approach to learning, as I like to call it, and be curious enough to be amazing in who you are, because we're all amazing. You're amazing. And let's keep helping one another strive and thrive in this world. And it starts with communication. So thank you again for joining us. And I'm excited to see you next time. And until then, be well, be loved. Thank you for listening to Pep Talks with Eric. If something sparked today, pass it forward. Remember to subscribe and share it with someone who needs it. Keep doing the thing. Keep showing up. You're not alone in this. And we're not whole without you. I'll see you next time.